SBC Media.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Bonus bets, promo dollars, sign-up offers, extra action, whatever you do, just don't call them free bets. Whatever you call them, though, promotional spending is a huge part of every U.S. sportsbook, particularly when it comes to launching in a new state. On today's episode of iGaming Daily, we'll delve into promo spending and look at what sportsbooks are offering, what kind of bang they're getting for their buck, and why DraftKings could be in hot water for their offer trying to give things away. I'm Jessica Welman, editor of SBC Americas and Canadian Gaming Business, joined by my senior journalist, Charlie Horner. Charlie, I feel like I do this to you so often, and I'm going to do it again. I know what promo offers look like in the U.S., but comparatively, like in the U.K., when you sign up for a new sportsbook, like what are they offering you? What do you get?
So my initial hypothesis on this is that the UK sportsbooks is such a mature market that they're just a lot smaller in bonuses. You know, you might get £30, £40. You'd be very lucky if you got a £50 bonus, and even then you would have to deposit a certain amount. And having seen some of the US offers, it's quite mind-blowing. So just as a quick scan over, I've got up a UK affiliate and a US affiliate, and I'll just go through the first three offers that I found on each one. So the UK, bet £10, get £30 free bets. Bet £10, get £40 in free bets, and up to £50 in free bets. The US is bet $5, get $150. Get your first deposit matched up to $1,500. And, this one's actually quite similar, actually. This one is bet $10 and get $40 for 5 days. So that's $200. So you can see the difference there. You get a lot more in the US than you do in the UK.
You know what's funny is from the US perspective, this is actually much cheaper than we used to be. Covering kind of the Pennsylvania launch, Indiana, these first ones, people went very big. And then New York, people went huge. Caesars was doing a $3,000 bet match. That, if I'm remembering correctly, they had to pull the promo before it was supposed to be over because they were just like going broke, trying to getting people signing up to use this. You kind of stole my thunder here. I looked at all of the Kentucky operators, and you were right that these are basically the same. FanDuel, Bet365, both are bet 5, get 150. Now, I will say, I believe that when we launched in Kentucky, the Bet365 did do the offer of bet 5, get 365, and they've just pulled that now that we're a couple months in. Fanatics, similarly, I'll be honest, they got me. They did their jersey offer where you bet $50, you get a free jersey of your choice up to, I think it was 150 was the credit that you get on the store. So I got both a jersey and a pair of leggings because I'm a sales shopper like that. Now they are the ones who, you bet $10 and for 5 days you get $40 each. And then the bigger ones are Caesars, DraftKings, the 1K deposit bonuses, or the bet match. This is BetMGM and Caesars are bet matches where if your first bet loses, you get it back. Now, fine print, BetMGM splits that up across 5 different bets that you can do. Whereas Caesars, if you bet 1,000, you lose. You have to bet 1,000 again on one thing. and you can't spread it out. We'll get into a debate on terms and conditions later, but we have curbed what we're doing. And I think some of this makes sense because I know plenty of poker players and professional bettors that are willing to do this, but I don't think the average person just has $3,000 lying around to deposit on a sports betting app. You're talking about a very elite level of customer. And now that we're, especially in these more mature states, looking to bring new people in, you want to get somebody who's probably more of a dabbler. And as a dabbler, getting $150 will probably last you months. But at that point, you maybe are developing the habit of betting $5 a week, and you've got more long-term value for the sports book in the end. And maybe that's too why the UK offers something smaller. I'm surprised they're not just like, here's a free t-shirt, welcome to the sports book.
In some ways, I think that would be quite valuable. I mean, to the extreme, the Fanatics offer was really impressive. I think that if the similar thing was done here with the Premier League, for example, that would get a lot of traction. Again, we'll get into the terms and conditions debate. But yeah, getting a free jersey for just depositing and betting is a really good offer. So yeah.
And I don't think that they, the other smart part of this is that to me, that jersey costs $110. To Fanatics, it does not. You're still making the same amount of money off of that jersey that you would if you were selling it to somebody who's not involved in the sportsbook at all. So that's the especially genius part of it to me. I don't really know how they reconcile the jersey promotion in terms of promotional spend. I don't know if that's something where like dollar for dollar you write it off. I'd be very curious to find out. What is nice, compared to Europe, we do get to see some of these numbers about promotional spend, but it really does depend on the state. Ohio is one where you do get to see. Maryland. Trying to think of some of the others. Pennsylvania will show you. So we get an idea of what people are spending. And now that we're getting in kind of the returns from September, October, and a couple of states, November, we're seeing not just who's spending in peak acquisition, but also who is, in particular, what ESPN Bet was doing, because we're starting to get the first returns there. Looking across the states, Charlie, have you seen anything about promotional spending that kind of stands out to you? I think generally we all kind of know FanDuel and DraftKings spend the most. It boils down to, I'd say, between 20 and 30% of what their total revenue is ends up being promotional spending in a more mature state. In a newer state, Kentucky, we saw promo spend was obviously a little bit higher. Anybody else, though, kind of shelling out the dollars?
Yeah, well, you mentioned ESPN Bet at the start, and I think it's an appropriate place to begin because the Maryland figures came out early this week, and they've gone out and spent $13 million in promotionals in their the first 2 weeks, really, because
it wasn't a full month. Yeah,
they launched mid-month, so they've spent around £26 million if you $26 million if you stretch it out across the entire month, which is extraordinary. Of course, they didn't get any taxable revenue off that because, they would say that they're investing for the long term. ESPN and Penn have both said that they're happy to spend big in order to get long-term gains in terms of market share. So that was, a bit of an eyebrow raiser.
Yeah, before you hop away from Maryland, a couple more points on it, which is the goal short-term, 10% of the market for ESPN Bet is what Jay Snowden and Penn have kind of said, 20% long-term. In this first month, where they were not operational for the entire month, they have already outpaced any month of Barstool Sportsbook. They had 6.2% of the market. But as you pointed out, they did spend $13 million in promotional credit, which is not 1/3 of revenue. It's 1/3 of handle because they took $33 million in bets. So you really have to keep in mind that number is very inflated. Sorry to interject. Move on to the next state.
But no, I would say that that is very much in line with what we've been told by Penn and ESPN separately. ESPN aren't going to come into this market without throwing around some cash to. Well, they want to. They're a trusted, authentic brand. They want to be the best in what they do, and I gather that's what they'd be expecting to do over the next few months. Yeah, moving over to Ohio now and to the October figures. Again,
where ESPN Bet wasn't live.
It wasn't live, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just for comparison, the final full month of Barstool, Penn spent $236,000 in promos. So
they never spent. They were like the whole value prop was that we don't need affiliates because we have this fleet of stoolies, and that really never bore out to work. So it's just a huge 180 from the approach and we knew that when they first announced this. Jay Snowden, as you mentioned, said, we are going to spend almost as much as we spent to even get ESPN involved on acquiring customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you can see the increase in the difference in strategy there. But Ohio in general follows, the usual trends, FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM spending big. However, Bet365, and this has rang true throughout the entire of 2023, consistently outspending most other operators. They spent $5.5 million in October. That is way more than BetMGM, which only spent just over $3 million. So you can really see that they are targeting this Ohio market as, a real base for them in the US, because they have, a very strong position in the UK market. They're one of the big four operators. They've got a really strong product in the UK, but they never really established themselves as one of the top players in the US. But I think in Ohio, you can see that they really want to get themselves on the podium there. So yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting ones in Ohio this year.
They're doing the same thing in Kentucky. They first revenue reports that came out gave us kind of that 1 week of September betting, and then October. FanDuel and DraftKings each did a little, right around 110 million. Bet365 was third with 28.6, and third by a margin. BetMGM and Caesars each put up about 13 million. They got there spending 16.5 million in promotional credit. So again, that's over half of what your total handle is. That it's going to be interesting. And I think we've started to see in Ohio this a little bit with Tipico, that came in and spent really big at the beginning of the year. How much is your market share going to fall off once you stop making these offers and kind of inflating your handle? I'll tell you this. When I am in Ohio, which I am fairly regularly, on TV I will see the Aaron Paul Bet365 commercial here and there. Living in Kentucky, I've seen nothing. They're not really doing ad spends and out of home spends, and there is just no brand awareness. It reminds me, the local news came to cover stuff, and they were asking us about, what's Bet365, and we were like, no, it's 365, and they're like, really? It's not 300? They don't even know how to say it. That you have to wonder if you can, 5 years in, come in, even in a new state like Ohio, and compete with the brand awareness simply through promotional spending. I'm not sure. I think once they stop spending, I would be curious to see how much things fall off.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in that as well. I mean, we often say that, marketing is one thing, promotional's another thing, but it's ultimately about the product and the user experience that's going to get you the long-term valuable customers. I think one state that I'm really intrigued to see how it plays out, particularly with Bet365, is in North Carolina when that opens next year, because they've linked with the Charlotte Hornets, I think, and there's similarities between Ohio and North Carolina. Really, there's a lot of pro teams, big population,
they're very college happy too.
Absolutely. And it's going to be a really competitive market. And, there are some, this is a whole other story, but the draft regulations have been approved in North Carolina, and that does have restrictions on what you can do in terms of marketing. So that'll be interesting to see when there's a little bit more of a level playing field between the operators, how Bet365 can assert itself amongst the big boys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what kind of steps they take. We've seen, I joked about it in the intro, like, oh, we've fixed things. We don't call them free bets anymore. So now everyone understands what's going on. Something that happened in Massachusetts this week, though, could kind of put that idea to the test. In Massachusetts, DraftKings is facing a class action lawsuit for violating the Massachusetts Consumer Protection Act. These kind of laws vary state by state. Surprise, surprise, Massachusetts is stricter than most, just in general, not just with gaming, about these sorts of things. So this group that is kind of an advocacy group for lots of things, drug addiction and encouraging kind of problematic behavior. It's called the Public Health Advocacy Institute, helped facilitate this class action lawsuit, claiming that DraftKings sign-up bonus was misleading on purpose and that no regular person could be reasonably expected to understand how it worked. Let me take a breath. I'm about to run down how this bonus works, and I will give them this. It's not simple. Okay, DraftKings calls it a $1,000 deposit bonus. So depending on how much you deposit, you get a portion of that given in, or you get a match given in bonus dollars. Unlike some of the older promos in which it was just dollar for dollar, this is a 20% deposit match. So if you wanted to max out and get $1,000, you would have to deposit $5,000 on this website. Charlie's face at this, just like the egregiousness of someone putting $5,000 on a betting website. Okay, that's step one. Now, there are pretty onerous playthrough requirements on this. And again, when we first started doing this 5 years ago, casino had some playthrough requirements. And I think we still kind of see that where, for example, you have to play through more on blackjack than you would slots because it's a higher return game, that kind of thing. The playthrough requirements are that throughout the course of 90 days, you're going to have to wager what totals to $25,000 on bets that are at least minus 300 or longer. You can't do sure things. And if you don't do that, you can't max out the bonus. The complaint I think somewhat justifiably points out that you would have to average betting close to $300 a day to clear this bonus.
That would get my responsible gambling bells ringing, I think.
Yeah, some of this is, I mean, I do think, the big, and this is the thing, when you go to that website, the big number you see is $1,000. I think as soon as a website asks me to deposit $5,000 is where I start to be like, something's fishy. I don't think I want to do this. I don't know. I would love to see the amount of people who, one, max deposit on this offer, and two, that if you do max deposit, how many of you are just naturally going to be the customer that, you're doing this to get max value, that you're going to do this. But I do think your point stands that, like, should a website or sportsbook operator ever encourage someone to bet close to $300 a day over the course of 3 months in order to maximize a bonus offer? Like, why are you putting that bonus offer out there?
Yeah, absolutely. And, can you be sued for putting out a bad offer? Ultimately, we've got to look at who this group is, and they, as you've rightly pointed out in your story, they have an anti-gambling stance. So they want to make the industry look as bad as possible. Obviously, I'm not an expert in Massachusetts state law, but I'm not sure whether there is a case here, but it's just not that good of an offer, because as soon as you realize that you're going to have to, deposit $5,000, bet $25,000, suddenly that $1,003 doesn't look that good.
So you are right that you can't just sue someone for, like, this is not a very beneficial offer for people. That's not really what this case is about. The case is more, as I understand them, I'm not a lawyer, but as I understand the Massachusetts Consumer Protection Act, is that, reading the terms and conditions, which they're in there. I've gone and looked, even though I never look at terms and conditions in general. Guilty. They spell out what this is. What they don't spell out is that this actually does kind of accumulate and add up to $25,000 in betting. This actually averages out to $276 a day. That is not in there. You kind of have to do the math to realize that that's going to be there. And I think that's the crux of what this case is that, if you're going to say this flashy 1K deposit, and then in the fine print, there's like a list of numerous boxes you have to tick in order to get there that actually do require a substantial financial investment, is that something a reasonable person taking up the offer would understand? I would be honest, I would kind of had, sight unseen, assumed it was dollar for dollar just from what I've known working in the industry. And I would have, I'm never depositing $1,000 on a sports betting site, but I would deposit the $1,000 and expect the $1,000 to be matched. And then I would be like shocked to learn I only get $200. I think that's probably what has happened to a lot of people. To give DraftKings their fair say in this, because I think we've been giving the PH AI side of this a little more. Here's what DraftKings gave to us as a statement. As a customer-first organization, DraftKings takes consumer protection and responsible gaming seriously. DraftKings respectfully disagrees with the claims and allegations made by the Public Health Advocacy Institute. Regrettably, the Institute ignored our multiple attempts to engage in an in-person dialogue to carefully examine their concerns and instead file suit. DraftKings intends to vigorously defend this lawsuit.
I think that's absolutely fair. From DraftKings' point of view, if people aren't reading those terms and conditions, then it's on them. It's like anything, and it does open up a wider debate about, as a society, should we be putting more effort into reading these and knowing what we're agreeing to. But we do know that in Massachusetts, they are a little bit stricter on these things. We sat through the regulatory meetings, and they were talking about, you have to put your terms and conditions on the billboard, and it has to take up a certain amount of space on the billboard. And that was a whole debate in itself. So maybe the context of where it is and the case itself might cause a bit of a debate in court. But I think both sides probably have a point, and this is why we are where we are.
Yeah, bottom line, I think it's an important conversation to have, because for the past year, I feel like I've just been saying, congrats, we're not going to call them free bets anymore. We've whipped out our thesaurus and come up with a different name, and this problem of people being confused is fixed. I tell people I got a free jersey from Fanatics. Like, that's how I explain it. I don't think that's particularly misleading. I think in this day and age, most Americans realize they're not just handing out jerseys when you sign up at a sports book. We're also just a very litigious country, though. I'm curious to see what this leads to going forward, and I think it kind of takes us full circle on this discussion, which is things have come a long way in 5 years, and I think it's a good thing that more sports books are leaning towards lower investment, where maybe you're not getting thousands and thousands in free bets, but you're getting enough bang for your buck. You're certainly getting more than Charlie's getting across the pond. So I'll be curious to see if they continue with this kind of offer. It does seem like it's working. DraftKings has kind of clawed back to a lot of market share in Massachusetts in particular. They are now dwarfing FanDuel. We don't really get to see promotional spend in that state, so we don't know how much they're spending to get there. But this offer does seem to be enticing enough to work in terms of gaining market share that I don't know if they'll revisit it or not going into 2024, but we'll see. All right, I'm all promoted out. Anything else people should be on the lookout for at SBC Americas, Charlie?
Well, obviously this week's been sort of dominated by yesterday's news that Entain CEO Jette Nygaard-Andersen is stepping down after a pretty turbulent year. You can listen to Ted Memure and I on iGaming Daily from yesterday, where we discussed that in a bit more depth and what the future could be for Entain going forward.
Yeah, that's a big one. We've got, revenue numbers rolling in. We've got the first ones out of Kentucky, as well as kind of the first numbers that we're seeing from ESPN bet for the states that, God bless you, states that report very early on your November numbers, as opposed to, you know, some of them that we'll hear about them in February. I will just say, because this one was a lot of fun to write, if you guys have time, I wrote up an interview with some of the folks at IGT about what goes into taking really nostalgic brands like Wheel of Fortune and Whitney Houston and turning them into slot machines. And I wish I had room to go into the detail that I did in these conversations where I was like, okay, so how do you balance the volume mix of what Whitney Houston song is playing and then the blue, 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 blue sounds of winning? And it's amazing the amount of thought that they put into it. But you can get an idea of kind of that if you head over to SBC Americas and check that out. Be sure to check out yesterday's episode of iGaming Daily. As Charlie mentioned, we'll have another great episode tomorrow, and we'll keep having great episodes throughout the rest of 2023. So keep tuning in to iGaming Daily.
SBC Media.